Okay, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to the first memorial lecture in the honor of late Dr. Pritam Singh. Late Dr. Pritam Singh was a master strategist, a thinker par excellence, an institution builder, and a philosopher, friend, and guide to not only the CEOs, but a lot of boards, academicians, and a lot of professionals, both in private as well as public sector. It is therefore in the fitness of things that in order to celebrate his contributions that he has made, we instituted this lecture in his honor. So the legend has passed away, but the legacy continues. As a matter of established protocol at the National HRD Network, may I, on behalf of everyone connected on this event, read out a code of conduct which is for the HR professionals. I will always strive to meet the highest evolving standards of competence in the profession and add value to the organizational success. I will deal with the stakeholders with utmost integrity and create an environment of trust leading to ethical success of my organization. I will ensure that I'm always reliable and consistent in all my actions by accepting responsibility for my decisions and actions, thereby creating credibility for my profession and myself. I will be objective in all my actions and decisions and foster fairness with firmness. I will conduct myself in a way that facilitates growth and development of all those I'm responsible for. I will strive to be a role model for all others and champion exemplary practice of HR profession. I will respect the rights of privacy, will not use my position for personal gains, and ensure that there is no conflict of interest in what I do with any of my stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my huge privilege to introduce to you the speakers this evening, the ladies and gentlemen of eminence in various walks of life. I'm privileged to introduce to you Dr. R.P. Singhania, the Chairman and Managing Director of JK Tyre and Industries Limited. Dr. David A. Sola, Professor of Entrepreneurship and Strategy, ESCP Business School, London. Dr. Asha Bhandakar, Distinguished Professor at IMI. Mr. Rajiv Dubey, Principal Advisor at Mahindra & Mahindra. Dr. Adil Malia, CEO and Partner at the firm. Dr. Alka Mittal, Director HR at ONGC. And Mr. Pushp Joshi, Director HR at HPCL, Hindustan Petroleum Corporation Limited. A very warm welcome to all of you, the speakers this evening. And without much ado, may I now request my colleague at the National HRD Network, Dr. Krish Shankar, to say a few words on this occasion. Dr. Krish Shankar, over to you, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure for me to be here in this first Dr. Pritam Singh Memorial Lecture. As you all know, Dr. Pritam Singh was a titan. I mean, he's been a great academician, but more than that, he's been a friend of HR. He's been a friend of NHRD for a long time. He's an academician who brought a lot of practical knowledge, a lot of wisdom, a lot of spiritual wisdom also. And I think everybody who's interacted with him has learned a lot from him. And really, in that honor, we wanted to really kind of celebrate Dr. Pritam Singh and his contribution to the HR community. And that's how we've kind of instituted this memorial lecture. So I think we are all indeed very grateful. I think everyone in the HR community is indeed very grateful for all the work that Dr. Pritam Singh has done, right from Lucknow, Gurgaon, various institutions, and in various capacities. that he's been a mentor to many of our associations, many of our companies, many HR conferences, and has really helped us and sharpen the way in which we need to go forward. But I think his legacy lives on, as Prem Singh said. And I think what we're going to do today is really think about the future. As you all know, we've been through kind of, if turbulence is one of the words people use, but it's in fact something that we never thought possible. 8 months of kind of turbulence that we've never could have imagined in the past. Every industry has gone through a lot of change. Some have done better, some have not done as well. People of all walks of life have been through different challenges. And what this period has done, this pandemic has done, is really completely changed the way we're going to look at work. We're going to look at how we're going to work together, our workplaces, completely in the future. I think this is a very, very important moment, and it is a moment for HR to really come together, think about what are the learnings that we have, and how do we really set our paths as we go forward in the future. Because we've got to reinvent HR in very, very different ways. We've got to reinvent the way we do business in the future. And I think this pandemic has taught and brought to life many, many important lessons. And I think we want to really use this time to think, put all those learnings together and move forward. And to do that, we've got a phenomenal group of people, academicians who are globally renowned, as well as business leaders, Park Compare, as well as HR leaders who've been at the helm of various things. So what we would like is to really get all of us together, and this is for us really kind of in memory of Dr. Pritam Singh, understand what are some of the challenges that are there, pick the best practices from the global experts, from the leaders of the business and the industry stalwarts, and see how we can go forward from here. So I'm really happy with everybody who has taken this opportunity to come here today. We are indeed really, really very privileged. Thank you all for spending your time. And I'm sure we'll be in for a phenomenal treat over the next couple of hours. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Krish. I truly appreciate your joining us this evening. And may I now request Dr. R.P. Singhania, the Chairman and Managing Director, to deliver the inaugural address. A very warm welcome to you, sir. Thank you very much. I know you have been extremely, extremely busy, but we are extremely grateful to you for having accepted our invitation to join us this evening. Over to you, and once again, a very warm welcome to you on this occasion.
Thank you, Mr. Prem Singh, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening. Dr. David Sola, Professor of Strategy and Entrepreneurship, ESCP Business School, London. Distinguished panelists and speakers, office bearers of National HRD Network, distinguished guests from corporate world and academia, members from the media, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings and good evening to you all. It is my privilege this evening to deliver the inaugural address at the first memorial lecture instituted by the National HRD Network in honor of late Padma Shri Dr. Pritam Singh. At the very outset, I would like to pay my heartfelt tribute to late Padma Shri Dr. Pritam Singh, who was not only an outstanding educationist, but an exemplary management guru, a powerful orator, an excellent strategist, and a charismatic leader. He was a lighthouse of wisdom who made a lasting impact on many organizations and institutions, both in public and private sector, nationally and internationally, with all his acknowledged Midas touch in turning them around. Today would have been his 79th birthday. While we are all aware of his distinguished career, I would like to urge you to recall the dedication he had to his work till the last day, and even more so, his ever-smiling face and his helpful nature. He had a remarkable ability to take out time for everyone and would patiently help individuals and organizations to find their path. I would like to refer to a quote from Sheryl Sandberg, which perfectly resonates with the personality of Dr. Pritam Singh. Leadership is about making others better as a result of your presence, and making sure that the impact lasts in your absence." Unquote. I had the pleasure of knowing late Dr. Pritam Singh for many years as a respected thought leader. We had quite often engaged in discussions of mutual interest, and every time I found his perspectives highly contemporary, apt, and very thought-provoking. We were extremely delighted when he was conferred with Padma Shri by the President of India in 2003 for his eminent contributions to the field of management education. Not only management institutions, his thought leadership and guidance was very often relied upon by many of the corporates to reorient and redefine their game plan. He was on the board of more than a dozen reputed public and private company sector organizations, helping them initiate the change process and charter their strategies. As an advisor and policy maker in many government and private sector organizations, he inspired all those he associated with through his dynamic leadership, entrepreneurial vision, thought-provoking ideas, and sheer passion. He was a member of the PM's Empowered Committee for selection of eminent institutions of India. He often engaged in debates on national and international management issues and encouraged the institutions to work on those issues by way of research or conducting conferences or seminars around those themes. A passionate academician and a successful institution builder, Dr. Pritam Singh brought with him a very unique storytelling approach to convey his ideas. Dr. Pritam Singh was a power-packed trainer, a trainer of CEOs, and he could lead one's mind into and his heart into a right direction. I would like to quote William Arthur Ward, who said, "The mediocre teacher tells, the good teacher explains, the superior teacher demonstrates, the great teacher inspires." In Dr. Pritam Singh, we had an outstanding leader who inspired hundreds and thousands of leaders. On the occasion of this memorial lecture, I am pleased to note that National HRD Network has chosen a very apt and relevant subject: organizational excellence, navigating through turbulent times, something so critical in the business environment today. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted the life as we know, and there is a paradigm shift in the way we work, interact socially, and pursue our personal and professional interests. Very well described by my previous speaker as real turbulent times. Paradoxically, collectively, we all wanted to flatten the pandemic curve, but in reality, we ended up flattening the economic curve and pushing in a downturn spiral, while unfortunately, the pandemic continues unabated. There is enough data available on the economic loss. It is quite well quantified, and sectorally business strategies are evolving. As for some, it has been an opportunity, while some businesses have literally had to reinvent themselves or perish. However, may I take this liberty to recommend that the eminent speakers in the august audience this evening may like to consider another very important perspective: the socio-economic impact of COVID-19 pandemic, and deliberate upon the ways and means of tackling the challenges arising out of this. While we may debate of a U-shaped or a V-shaped economic recovery curve, uncertainty about the future, fear of the pandemic causes untold stress. It may be difficult to assess the impact of this crisis on individuals, as each person is wired differently, but ultimately it impacts organizations. Just to illustrate the very fact that many are working from home, lack of personal and social interaction and informal chats has led to a sense of isolation for many. Many newcomers in the organizations have yet to see an office, as they have joined virtually and are still working virtually. Perhaps this was not their vision just a year ago when they were undergoing campus placements. As custodians of the most precious resource of every organization, human resource, the National HRD Network, which is the apex body of HR professionals for people development in India, with 15,000 plus strong members and 30 plus chapters, is uniquely placed to mold human resource and ultimately support the organizations in their endeavors. In view of these challenges, building resilient, agile organizations that are quick to learn and unlearn is the need of the hour. The immediate imperative is to ensure businesses survive, revive, and thrive. It may seem naive to focus on the long term given the adverse conditions that businesses face today. However, every crisis brings with itself certain opportunities. A BCG research shows that even during the pandemic downturns, revenue growth, not cost cutting alone, is the primary driver of financial performance, and companies that have grown faster during the downturns tend to continue growing faster even after the downturn disappears. I am sure that the deliberations this evening will provide a lot of useful insights to the audience towards revival and sustainable success in their pursuits. To conclude, I would like to compliment the National HRD Network by institutionalizing the annual memorial lecture in the memory of Padma Shri Dr. Pritam Singh. Is a great way to pay tribute to his charismatic personality. Recalling the legacy of Dr. Pritam Singh, I would like to quote Maya Angelou, who said, "I have learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." I also take this opportunity to wish NHRDN, as it popularly known as, great success in their endeavors. Jai Hind, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for that very inspiring address. We are truly inspired with your words of wisdom, and your presence has made the entire evening very, very memorable and meaningful. And just to add to what you have said, just to echo your thoughts, may I also quote another thinker, Orrin Woodward, who said, "Average leaders raise the bar on themselves. Good leaders raise the bar for others, but great leaders inspire others to raise their own bar." That was the legacy of Dr. Pritam Singh, and it is so heartwarming you echoing the same thoughts on this evening. Thank you very much. Moving on, may I now request Dr. David A. Sula, who have joined from ESCP Business School, London. Thank you very much, Dr. Sula. We know that you have worked many, many years with Dr. Pritam Singh, and we are truly inspired by your presence this evening. Over to you, Dr. Sula, and thank you once again for joining us this evening.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor for me to be here. First of all, can you see my screen?
Yes, doctor, we can.
Okay, that's perfect. So I'd like to start with a picture of my dear friend, Professor Pritam Singh, because I'm here because of him. I met the NHRD many years back because I was one of your guests at one of your many great events that you have, and that's why I got to know India. I got to know your community, and I got to know your great companies that are representing this network. And I like also to state a quote that I learned from Professor Pritam, which really made pretty much my life, and it was a verbalization of something I always knew, but he made sure that I got it right. And he said, "People get tired when they find job uninteresting, but if a job is your hobby, you can work tirelessly for long hours." And this is pretty much what I do today. I don't know if what I'm going to share with you is going to be interesting for you, but definitely what I'm going to share with you is what I love doing, which is thinking about problems and try to solve them, or try to help people to solve them even better. And as mentioned before by the eminent person that spoke before me, the topic of today it's really around organizational excellence and navigating through turbulent times. This picture is just something that might not be quite real yet, but it looks like that whenever we think that something cannot get worse, it can always get worse. And the reality is that whenever there is a crisis, there is a light after the tunnel. And today I'm here to talk about the issues as well as the potential solution that an HR community like the one of yourself and a leadership community can do to think a little bit ahead of the problem. I always say that to my students, to the people I deal with it, when problem comes, it's too late. You need to think about them before. And of course, that doesn't mean that the problem will disappear, but if you thought of them before, you might be better equipped to solve them. So how I'm going to structure this first lecture is I'm going to give you some background context about what I mean or what I understand by turbulence. Then I'm going to take you through what are the issues that impact organizations. And last but not least, I'm going to try to give you some insights about what organizational excellence will mean in the future. Maybe in the immediate future, for some of you, for others, maybe something that is more of a journey to take on. So why do we talk about turbulence? When something is turbulent, it's because we cannot predict it. Yeah. And if you look at this picture, there are a number of things that have happened. And at their time, they created a lot of turbulence. Yeah. So we got World War I, we got the Japanese tsunami, we got the Asian crisis, we got, of course, the 9/11 terror attack, but we also have the crude oil crisis and the Lehman Brothers and the 2008 Great Recession. So what do you think have those things in common? Well, one thing that they have in common is that before they happen, people thought they could not happen. Yeah, they were considered white swan. They were considered, sorry, and they are considered black swan. In fact, a black swan for any child, when they see it the first time, then it becomes very normal. For any person that has always considered swan white, once you see them, the first black one, it might be a little bit of a shock, but then after that, it's perfect normality. In fact, this is what Nassim Taleb kind of verbalized and popularized with his book, The Black Swan, about events which create turbulence that when they happen, after that, right after that, they become perfect normality. And in fact, all those events that we spoke before, they were unpredictable, or better, for the most people, they were unpredictable or they were very unlikely. Of course, there were people that they were seeing it coming. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, the weak signals. Because it's very easy to say something, oh, it's a big issue when it's big, but it's too late. So we need to learn, and part of the organizational excellence of the future will be to learn from weak signals. But think about this pandemic. You can see online, and you can see even in the book I just mentioned, The Black Swan, written in 2007, there is a chapter about global pandemics. And you probably know Bill Gates, there is a famous video that in 2015 were saying that the biggest issue will be a pandemic. And all of those things, they were there, people were talking about it, but by most, they were considered very unlikely, very almost impossible to happen. But once they happen, it's perfectly normal. So it's perfectly normal for us to do the first memorial lecture online, where a year ago, this would have been a very big event in one of the wonderful venues that NHRD always pick for his events. But it's perfectly normal that now we are remotely doing it, and we are perfectly comfortable doing it. So what I think for most of you is very clear, and if it's not clear, I think it's time really for a deep reflection, is that the next period will even be more volatile, will be even more complex, will be even more messy. It's a fact of life. Everything now runs at a much faster speed, and we call it VUCA, yeah? Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So there will be, and let's leave the false hope away. The speed and frequency and scope and scale of disruption can only increase. The technologies, the connectivity that we have, because it's explosive. We are totally connected. And it's not just a question of technology. It's a question that every supply chain now, if you have a problem in one part of the world, we will have a huge disruption somewhere else. And the issue to further complexify the problem is that there is no clear patterns. Every disruption seems to be different from the previous one. So it's very, very difficult to get prepared. We've been educated with methods which they were emphasizing predictability. And so leaders and managers, they are there because they are planned, or they are organized around things that can be planned. But as one of my first bosses told me, Davide, you're not paid to make the inevitable happen. The inevitable will happen. So as leaders, we need to think ahead of the problem and try to not to make it happen. And for that, I think the first, if you want, thought of today is that leaders, as well as any employee, which for me, everyone has some level of leadership role, will need to learn to listen to very weak signal. Weak signal that are within a lot of noise. Yeah. So the future, it is something that somebody has to imagine it and somebody has to work on it. But the noise is so big that it's very difficult to filter it out. And we will need to become much better at sense making and try to understand things not just by the facial value, but going much deeper, which Professor King was a very, very big pioneer in that respect. So, given this VUCA world, organizational structure and the way we manage things will be put under enormous pressure. Yeah. So I think that and you know what I think is rather irrelevant, but it's pretty much before our eyes that the connectivity of organization is beyond what we would ever think. Yeah, we are connected 24 hours. We are connected right, left, and center. Before, in the old days, if I wanted to meet the CEO of a company, I would have to go through a certain process. Now I can just drop a WhatsApp. I can drop a message or ping it or ping him or her in any sort of social device. Anything that can be distributed will be distributed. So workforces, organizations, supply chains, they are totally distributed. So thinking, 9 months ago would have been unthinkable that a company could work 100% remotely. Now, it is, although we all say we will go back to the old ways, we know very well that we will not go back 100% to the way we were doing before, because we learned that we can work in a distributed manner. And all this will put a lot of pressure on organizations that are still rather centralized and where authority is still centralized. And this will be radically decentralized. And hierarchies, which although we've been working on it for many, many years, will be replaced, and they are replaced by much more liquid structures. And all this creates havoc, creates a crisis, because we've just not been trained for that. And all of us, we will be immigrants in such world. We will not be native. Yeah. And so the reality, the big question is, most leaders, most organizations aren't ready for this. And are you? And that's the question. And what does it take to be ready? So, but let's think now, if this is the problem definition, let's think about what is the complexity around it. What happens if you don't do it? What happens if you don't ask this very, very profound question? Well, you've seen what happened in these days, and the Black Swan happens, something turbulent, a turbulence happen, and you will have a number of companies that they drop, a lot of companies drop, but many of them will not be able to bounce back. So we have a lot of organizations that during this pandemic proven to be very fragile. And a fragile object, if you hammer it, it cracks into 1,000 pieces. Yeah. And that's the reality. And at the moment, we are just at the response level. So we saw the drop and companies are trying to respond to it. But the history shows us that a lot of those companies were after a turbulence disappeared, or they at least lost their positions. You know, you probably remember the Lehman Brothers, the AIG, the Royal Bank of Scotland. Royal Bank of Scotland still exists as a brand, but as a company is completely disappeared. Pan Am, you know what happened after their crash. Now, thanks God, there are some companies that they show resilience. Yeah. So there are companies that already now, as the previous speaker mentioned, they are able to bounce back. They're able to show some level of resilience. But let's also think that the resilience just means being able to go back to how the world was before, or at least at the same level of performance. That's much better than a fragile organization. But since we had a crisis, there is a lot to reconstruct. So there will be organizations that are able to bounce back even more than resilient. Yeah. So resilience is very good, and companies that are able to be resilient, look at, you know, Volkswagen after the diesel scandal, or Apple after the 2008 issues. They have been able to bounce back, and Apple is as strong as ever, and Volkswagen is back into a very strong point. But now, during this period of crisis, when the tide of the waves will be very, very low, you will start to see some organizations that actually they're able not only to bounce back, but to demonstrate anti-fragility. Yeah, anti-fragility, it's a concept, again, that was developed by Nassim Taleb to explain that robustness doesn't exist in organization. Yeah, because nothing can be built to be robust in every situation. You can build anti-fragility. So an ability to be rebuilt quickly and maybe in a different form. And that's what really we need to think about. How can we, you know, turbulence is there to stay. It might take different forms, but it will be even more frequent and even more deep. So what we need to think about is, how can we build organizational excellence? How can we build organizations that will be able to cope in such an environment? And so here is really my point. So my take of today is I tried to put together several thoughts, and several thoughts that come from my research. And as mentioned before, I'm a professor of strategy and entrepreneurship, so I'm not a specialist in organizational behavior. Everything I learned about that and leadership comes a lot from Professor Pritam Singh. And but here is more something I share with you, almost like a tentative approach to see, before your very expertise, you are all men and women dealing with organizational excellence, what I think we need to think about. Yeah. So the first is that I believe that there are a number of aspects, and this list is not supposed to be conclusive, but is my best hypothesis at the moment. So anti-fragility will require a new breed of organizational excellence, which means new organizational models, but as well, new organizational skills. So I'm gonna briefly talk you through those, but then I'm gonna, if you want, I can take you more in detail. Yeah. So the first one is organization will need to learn a new skill, which I call imagineering the likely futures. Far too often, we organize ourselves based on the present trends, but we don't think the unthinkable. Yeah. So imagineering likely future means, I don't know if you ever watched on Netflix something like Black Mirror. Yeah. So it's really to use imagination and use some technique to really think about potential future that might or might not happen. Often we can do it much more easily than you think. So I have absolutely no doubt that in 15, 20 years time, we will have some level of technology within our body. Yeah. What form would it take? I don't know. Would it be a microchip, as some people talks about? Would it be just a tablet that I take that is full of nanobots that go into my body and cleans it up or whatever problem I've got? I don't know. There is many competitive different, but I've got no issue to think that in 20 years' time, we will have some level of technology within our body. Yeah. So that's a future that may or may not happen, but it's something that you need to consider. Yeah. And this type of skill, it is something that is not just for the leaders. Distributed within the organization, people, they have to think about what could happen in 10, 15, 20 years' time, because by building that skill, it might happen in 5 and you are ready. If you think of a problem in advance, you might be prepared mentally to cope with it. The second big thought is around the shape of organizations. Yeah, we've been all trained and built on a shape of an organization that looks like a mountain or a pyramid. Well, the organization of the future may have a lot of pyramids, but those pyramids, they fluctuate like in a fluid organization. Sometimes they're taller, sometimes are smaller, sometimes are very flat, and they will be fast moving. So it's shape shifting. And this is a second big thought. And if you think about this pandemic, the organizational structure have become very, very flat just because of technology. The next one, which is very linked to the previous one, is we will need to train people to deal with the future well before the future could happen. So here I see a big role of the HR community in learning how to build simulations, and in particular games. Games are an environment where people by default make mistakes. If you play a game, your default position is that you will die or you will make a mistake, and then you will need to start again. And if you use gaming to build resilience, resilience will be part of your way of doing things. And gaming will not just be built. I believe that we should investigate how to use games, not just for resilience, but also for grit, to get people more passionate at exploring things that they think they would not happen. And guess what? The fourth aspect that we're going to touch upon is maximizing talent density. We talk a lot about talent, but whenever you have more complexity, you need to double up on talent. Yeah. So in this type of moments, I would see organizations that they are thinking about turnarounds to double up into their talent uptake. They really need to nurture the existing talent and to maximize the quantity, because only with talent you will be able to deal with the complexity. And later on I'll give you some examples from Netflix, for example. Now, another aspect, and here really Professor Pritam Singh was a pioneer on it, is that organizational excellence will mean have people that they understand the role and the function of positive energy, but most importantly, they're able to nurture it and transmit it. If we don't have hope, how can we cope with disruptions? Often in the last few years, we've been all around us is all about negativity. We always see a crisis as the negative of the old model being replaced, instead of the hope that the new model will be better. And the leaders and the organization will need to push for positive energy everywhere. Now, if you think about shape-shifting organization, then you cannot think without having the dimension of enhancing freedom of action. And freedom of action nowadays, with the technology and with the pandemic, we know that people are not anymore on your line of sight. You don't see them in the corridor. You cannot pop in their offices. You cannot really oversee what they do. And because of that, you need to build structures and processes that allow action, of course, within certain constitution or within certain rates. And last but not least, the last aspect I invite you to reflect upon is the fact that you will need to learn to be a leader without being there. Of course, already now, leaders cannot be sitting in every room, but at least people, they see that seeing a person, it's part of what it means leadership, having the proximity, where this pandemic has shown us that leadership, it's all through a digital medium. As far as you are concerned, I could be a bot, that has been given a script to tell you. How do you know that I'm a human? How do you know that I exist? So, and this will push leadership to learn how to lead and follower how to follow in ways that we have not been keen for most of our times. So those are 7 big thoughts which I propose you to reflect for the organizational excellence of the future. They involve a little bit of organizational model, and they also involve a little bit more of new organizational skills. Now, I asked my eminent organizer how much time I still have. Mr. Singh, just wanted to check if I still have 10 minutes as by timing, or I can do a little bit more. It's not there. Anyway, I'll deep dive a little bit into. So let's look at the first one. So how do you imagine likely futures? Well, first and foremost, you have to think back from the future. So when you're looking at the future, we tend to do it from the present to the future. Well, we need to do the other way back. So if you watch maybe a few years back the film Back from the Future, you will see, if you watch it now, you will see that some of those predictions, they haven't actually happened. Yeah. Now, how do you imagine your future is by looking at weak signal. So something that will be a big thing in the future might start to bubble up. And remember that if something will be big in the future, somebody is imagining it now. Now, let me give you some example. So here you can see, for example, cities that will be built on biotechnology, that they will be living animal, yeah, living being. Here you could see that not very much in the distant future, we could live underwater. If you think about 3/4 of the planet is water. Is it possible? Is it not possible? The real question is, should I care? Is it something that is an opportunity, or is it something that is a threat for me? But now we are all in the HR community. I'm a teacher. What about how is going to be the education of the future? Could I have an avatar? Could I have an agent that could give feedback to my students, that could follow them everywhere, that could replicate what I would do, so that I will be able to do it? Now, you might think that this is crazy, but there are already examples of this. If you go online and you look for Miku, this is an hologram singer that has millions of followers. This is something that is AI created, and it's an hologram. This lady, if you can call it a lady, this being is able to attract 60,000 people in a stadium for a concert made of an hologram with music that is created by AI. So this is something that, of course, is very, very tiny, is a weak signal. But imagine this in 15, 20 years, how it could change the role of teaching. Think about simulations. I believe that the business school of the future will be a place where executives come to simulate how the company could be run, rather than us teaching them technique. The technique will be embodied in simulations that allow them to do it. And of course, we start to see signals of that already now. Now, shape-shifting organization, it's all about the concept that companies will be networks of people, yeah, where there will be leadership form, but there will be different shape. There will be bigger, smaller group. So an organization might well be a federation of groups. And you all heard about Google or companies like Amazon. Amazon only in the UK has more than 250 separate entities dealing with each other. Some as small as 10 people, some as big as 150 people. But I'd like to give you an example of a company that exists since much longer, and it's an engineering company. Gore Associate famous for the Gore-Tex and famous for many, many, many different products, has been adopting a shape-shifting organization since 70 years. I say 60 years. 60 years is, but the founder, William Gore, had been using it already at DuPont. So this might seem sci-fi, but in reality, shape-shifting organizations have been around. And the thing is that they were only the domain of people that have huge foresights. But I believe that whoever doesn't consider this type of new organizational form might be misplaced in very, very short time. Now, the next one I mentioned is the role of gaming. Yeah. So gaming, it is something very, very important and something that it's the domain of an industry, the gaming industry. But in reality is that we already have now the instrument and the tools to allow people to improvise, to test, to role play in very immersive ways. So gaming could be a way to have executives and members of organization to test and simulate situations that are unpredictable. And if they would ever happen, it would be too late. Yeah. So gaming has an enormous potential to help us to drive through the turbulent times. And the good news is that there are already strategy games. Yeah, you might see them as games, but I study them because they are full of situations where you have to learn to deal with other teams, to work within your teams, to try to think about what the competition will do. And those are there. And I invite you to play sometime, maybe look with your children or if you're passionate, because you might, by looking this lens, you might see much more than what we see at the moment. And to the point that I really think that in the future, as HR professional, you might look for gaming experience in the resume, in the CVs of the people and the leaders of the future. Now, the third element is maximizing talent density. Well, you all know how Netflix was able from a very humble startup to displace the like of Blockbuster, to displace the like of Universal. And in a world that was, let's remind ourselves that Netflix started as a rental of DVD by post. Yeah, that was their business model. Now they are one, if not the biggest entertainment company in the world. How they could, and therefore they changed their business model several times. They went from rental to streaming. They went from streaming to production of their own, and now they're going to live events. Yeah, so those are major changes. They touch at least 3 or 4 different industries. And how did they manage it? Is that as the complexity was increasing, they would increase the percentage of hiring of high performance people. Doing what? Doing, of course, an environment that attracts those type of people. Of course, topping up in terms of packages, all those, but also demanding, having a culture that demands high engagement and high performance. And again, performance, I'm not talking financial only, yeah? So this brings us to the last 3 points that I wanted to touch today, which is positive energy. Now, we are in a world where if you stay online for half an hour, you could have a nervous breakdown. It's full of negative information. Also, as you know, and this goes back from a long time. If we even think in the educational tradition, we tend to tell students what's wrong, not what's good. Of course, we learned through scholars like Carol Dweck about growth mindset. So we learned that it's very, very important to help the people to build the talent, and the knowledge is not a fixed amount, but is a muscle that you can train. But to do that, there is a fundamental point which needs to be built, which is hope. Leaders of the future needs to speak about hope. Yeah, and I'm not just talking about politicians, I'm talking about everybody. And as Nelson Mandela famously said, the brave man is not who does not feel afraid, but is who conquers the fear. And how do you conquer the fear? With the hope that you can get a better after the tunnel. And this, of course, will bring us to this literacy, which Professor Pritam Singh was a huge pioneer, which is built on positive energy. And that is not just on the mindset, but it's also on taking care of the health of people, the mental health of people, because organizations, they are under a huge duress. These 9 months, yes, we lost thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that they lost their lives. But what I'm worried is the psychological repercussion on the people that are still alive, and that they will need to cope with this in the next years. Now, freedom of action is something that I'm a great believer. Yeah, and again, I'll bring you the example of Gore, where every single employee is free to choose who to work with. And the funny thing about this organization is an organization that exists since 68 years. So 68 years, the whole organization, the whole company, which is split in many different units, is organized around task forces of people that they decide who they want to work with. And this, of course, brings a completely new dimension to leadership. We all know that leaders are as good as the number of followers they have. In Gore, a leader is only a leader if he has followers. And leadership is shape-shifting. So I might be the leader for a particular project, but I might be following somebody else in a different project. And they made it from a thought into an organizational shape. And here, the freedom is the base. Of course, you might say, but freedom then will bring anarchy or complete chaos. In fact, the organization is very, very strict, because people, if you follow a leader that then doesn't deliver, you will stop following, and then you will follow another one. So all those organizations, they're very fluid, but they're self-regulated. Last but not least, which is the last thought I leave you with, is the fact that we will need to learn to be leaders without being there. The fact of being there, which has been for millennia the way leaders would show role modeling, would show their voice, they would use their charm and their positive energy, it will be filtered through screens. Yeah. So we will need to learn to be there without being there. We will need to learn to codify values and make sure that people follow them without being able to role model them in front of them. And this is something that we need to consider, because, for example, how many of us are trained on using their voice? How many of us are trained in being in front of a screen? Some of us may have done acting school, but we have, that's not something we teach at business school. Yeah. But of course, being on a screen, to be effective in front of a screen, it involves being able to change the tone of your voice, or it involves being able to act. If you would be in a lecture, in a physical lecture, I would be sounding and looking very, very different. I'm Italian. I use a lot my hands. My energy will come out of my tone of voice that changes. I'm not sure that that comes across in the same way through Zoom. So here, I just put you a little bit of a chart that shows you what are the different ways that we will need to enhance our leadership by knowing that we will not be physically in proximity of our followers. And this is really what I wanted to share with you. And thank you for now. It has been very unidirectional. I hope it was interesting, and of course I'd like to share with my fellow panelists the discussion, which I'm sure they will be much more interesting.
Thank you very much, Dr. Davide Sola. That was truly inspiring and absolutely fitting into the theme. And I know that there are a lot of questions on the screen. However, in the spirit of the time, I just want to ask only 1 or 2 questions. And the other questions I would request to be discussed in the panel discussion. And this question, the first one is from Dr. T.V. Rao. Dr. T.V. Rao, thank you very much for joining us on this call. And Dr. T.V. Rao himself is regarded as one of the founding fathers of HRD movement in the country. So his question is, what are 2 or 3 lessons of transformational leadership propounded by Dr. Pritam Singh that may have particular relevance to post-pandemic world? Dr. Sola, if you want to make any quick comment on that.
I think I can probably tell you my personal view on that. I learned many things from Professor Singh, but the one about spiritual and positive energy, it is something that I think is an undervalued aspect of transformational leadership. People that they will, leaders that they can create a context where people have hope. Yeah, in turbulent times, things will get worse before getting better, and and having that energy institutionalized across the organization will do a tons of benefit. And that's something that I learned over the years, because Professor Singh would always see the positive into a challenge. It could be from the most trivial issue, oh, there is a problem because the bus is late, and therefore we're going to be 2 hours late for an executive program, to much deeper issues like the pandemic, when I spoke to him not short before he passed, and he was always looking at what can we learn from this, how can we put a positive swing. And that's really something that nowadays, unfortunately, when we're talking about performance management, we really are not talking about performance management, we're talking about disaster management. You never hear a leader, or I rarely hear a leader that talks about overperformance. So if you do overperformance, it should be as important as underperformance. Because if it's overperformance, it means that you predicted 100 and you did 200. So clearly there is something you didn't know. But rarely you would call an urgent meeting if you doubled the performance rather than if you halved it. And this is something that, again, I think Professor Singh was a pioneer. It definitely was an inspiration for me on that. But perhaps Professor Sukthankar can top up in that.
Okay, thank you so much. And one last question before we move to the panel discussion is from Meghna from ONGC. The question is, do you see organizations going back to their old ways after the pandemic is over? So if the question is for me, is they will definitely try. I definitely think it's impossible that they will go back to the old way of doing things. It's, like all things that you stretch, they want to go back to their initial position, but because this stretch has been long enough to make the fiber really loose. So I do not believe, any leader that tells me that they will be able to go back to their previous way of working, I think he might not have a long position. You will not stay very long in that position. That's my view. It might be very too strict, but I really believe that people that do not see as an opportunity to rethink structures, that they could not be challenged, because let's always remember that a crisis is a godsend. Yeah, a crisis will show people that are not equipped for the situation. Yeah, and it will, if we read it correctly, see the people that are equipped. And we should not make the mistake of then, and this is really policymakers more than leaders in organization. Policymakers should not see that we need to help organizations that are ill-equipped. We need to make sure that the ones that are well-equipped, they are surviving and thriving, and they will replace the ones that are ill-equipped. Because this crisis, I always see crisis as a godsend and as good. It's a way to reset a system, and that's really my hope, that although in the short term it will cause havoc and will cause crisis, but crises are there for a reason, because the system is not resilient. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Sola. That was very, very inspiring. Now, by the way, as we celebrate the birthday of Dr. Pritam Singh, late Dr. Pritam Singh, today's day is also joined by the birthday of Peter Drucker. And thanks to Dr. T.V. Rao for bringing this to the knowledge of all of us. Today is also very special from another two standpoints. This is also, there are two other very important days. I would not go into the details. I would rather invite the suggestions from the audience, and those who get the right answer will announce their names during the next 1 hour's window. So it's a competition open to everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Sola. Now over to my colleague, Dr. Asha Bhandarkar, for leading the panel discussion. Once again, a very warm welcome to you, Dr. Asha, Dr. Adil, Mr. Rajiv Dubey, Mr. Pushp Joshi, and Dr. Alka Mittal. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Asha.
Thank you. Good evening to everyone. It's such a privilege to be here. Thank you for my fellow panelists for being present. Davide, it was great listening to you. It was lovely to listen to Singhania Saab. And it's a great occasion, and I feel so proud to be part of this event. And 20 years ago, Dr. Pritam Singh and I had written a book, the title of which would be very relevant, for us to talk about today. The book was called Winning the Corporate Olympiad. So in the context of organizational excellence, I think this term has immense meaning, because when we talk excellence, we are talking of continuously excelling our best and continuously trying to do better and better. And in that context, a point which Dr. Singh always made was that excellence is not a destination, excellence is a journey. So if you see it from this perspective, that means there is no place for complacency. There is no space for being inward looking. There is no space for being closed-minded. There is no space for arrogance for organizations if they have to continue to be on the path of excellence. And to do this in the context of turbulence is the double challenge, I guess. And to decode how to go about it, to understand what is it that great companies have been doing. After all, we have some good examples in this country itself. And I'm going to invite our panelists to speak and share their experiences and share their views regarding how to go about it and what they have seen in terms of how to create excellence, organizational excellence, despite the turbulent contexts, some of which Davide has brought out very scarily, but even otherwise, we are all still experiencing it. Now, I would like to go to each panelist, because each panelist has a unique perspective to share. And I would request for 5 or 6 minutes each. I have a bell with me. If you want, at the end of 5 minutes, I will gently tinkle it. Otherwise, if you want, I raise a finger, but that's not very polite. I'll just do the bell. And the bell means you have 1 more minute, okay? And I'm going strictly alphabetically by last name. All of you are my great distinguished panelists, and I have equal respect for all of you. And normally I have seen, because my name is Asha, last name is Bhandarkar, no matter what happens, I'm always in the front. And I feel so bad for the others, So therefore, we start with the last name. We start with Rajiv Dubey this time. And okay. Welcome, your turn. Please go.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Asha. So first, I just want to take off from where the good professor ended. I think in the new normal, in addition to VUCA, there will also be a pushback by all stakeholders. So the context in which there is fear and uncertainty is VUCA plus a pushback. In that kind of a context, I think there are both short-term problems of just survival and cash flows, and also obviously creating the possibility for asymptotic growth once the survival phase is over. And in this context, I would like to make a few major points. I think that there is a central role of purpose and values in taking decisions pertaining to cash flows, people, and supply chains. That's number one. I think leadership behavior is going to be absolutely crucial in even deciding how decisions get taken. And I would like to posit that the fundamental requirement of leadership, which must be stretched, is the ability to create trust so that people can trust the leader, and the leader in turn trusts his people so that he or she is able to empower and create a distributed leadership. Because there will need to be a lot of iterative decision making and changes taking place right through the value chain. And unless the leader, led by purpose and operating out of trust, is able to empower and create a distributed leadership, things will not work. So I have talked about the central role of purpose, and in that you can add values, the huge role of trust, and following from that, empowerment and distributed leadership. Then the ability to deal with fear and ability to leverage failure. Because in the new normal, which is VUCA plus pushback, there will have to be a lot of experimentation, because you will not be able to have a long-term strategy. And to allow experimentation and to allow people to take risk, the leader has to create, and this again is connected with trust, the psychological safety so that people can take risk. And equally important, how do you learn from failure to create the stepping stones to success? And finally, I would like to add that the leader should have the ability to use the whole mind, which is to be able to combine what is loosely called the left brain of logic, intellect, and rationality with the right brain of empathy, hope, intuition, and of connecting the dots to see the big picture. So now let me just put this all together. I think organizational excellence in the time of turbulence, central role of purpose, trust, empowerment, fear and failure, and the ability to use the whole mind. Everything here is both in the short term and in the long term. The ability to unleash the potential of people and of situations is hugely, hugely central to this whole picture that I have painted. Finally, I would like to stress that, of course, you need strategy. You need structure, you need processes, and you need metrics. But these must be derived from purpose and values, and they must incorporate extreme care for all stakeholders and the core values of the organization. With this, I hope I have completed in 5 to 6 minutes, and I will let better people take over. Thank you very much.
So that is awesome time management. Thank you so much. You didn't give me a chance to ring the bell, man.
I'm so sorry. You can still ring it. It's a nice sound. I love the sound of that bell.
Okay. May I now go over to Mr. Pushp Joshi?
Yeah, very good evening. In fact, what I will do is whatever time Rajiv Dubeji has left, I would like to utilize that, so
yeah,
it
sure.
comes that way. So thank you, Dr. Bhandarkar. Very good evening to my fellow panelists, Dr. and Dr. R.P. Singhania, Dr. Sula, Dr. T.V. Rao, who all are there. Very good evening. I actually, I possibly cannot thank the organizers enough for affording me this opportunity to pay tribute to the legend, Dr. Pritam Singh. Because as Dr. Bhandarkar mentioned initially while we were chatting, that I have known him for last 30 years now. And while we have described him in various facets of his personality, and they can be innumerable. I will just take this opportunity to quote Nida Fazli when he said that हर आदमी में 10-20 आदमी होते हैं जिसको भी देखना ध्यान से देखना, जिसको भी देखना बार बार देखना. So Dr. Pritam Singh, for me, was a great human being, a very noble soul. And truth be told, I have still not reconciled with myself in calling him late Dr. Pritam Singh. Uh, while I speak further, I'm actually acutely conscious of one of the quotes he shared with me long ago. It was, I think, Scott's quote, where he said that Push, and he used to have a very unique way of calling my name. He said, Push, uh, you should speak not when you want to say something, but you should speak when you have something to say. So I'm very conscious of that fact while I'm speaking. So, those who are not connect, and we can go further and see what are the kind of connects which can come. But the current challenge, which was very nicely talked about by Dr. Sula, to my mind, it has given us an opportunity, a sort of pit stop, to revisit our HR charter and see. It's a great opportunity for us to see what steps we can take and what kind of things we should do now. We should reflect back, and in that, we should try and answer the question that what we should be doing more of, what we should be doing less of. And in this, we should see that what is not going to change despite all this. While we have a big list of things which are going to change, and the strategies for those will evolve because they are not cast in stone, because the things are still changing. But let's take this opportunity and see that what is not going to change. And if we work on that basic humanness, basic purpose, basic human attributes, in fact, with Rajiv Dubeji's permission, I would like to quote his comments which were there on Dr. Pritam Singh and Asha Bhandarkar's book. He says that those who are not connected with their true inner self are unlikely to be successful transformational leaders in the brave new world. So, very well said, Rajiv ji. And I think that is the core thing. And when we are reading Dr. Adil Malaya's blog on man's search for meaning and the purpose, and Rajiv ji also talked about the purpose. So we in our organization, what we thought was that on the platform of hope, on the safety net of hope, let us try and go back to the basics and try and see that what are the things which are not going to change, and tell our leaders to practice that more and more of, like compassion, like kindness, the trust, empathy. In fact, we have thought about it that we are going to institute an award for failure, where we will be acknowledging the failure, we will be acknowledging the effort in that failure. And I mean, just last week, I think on the 1st of November, a very good paper was presented by Boris Groisberg, who is a professor at Harvard, where he said that good leadership is an act of kindness. And what he said is that three things which we need to do is be kind, and be kind. And these turbulent times, we have to actually go back to those basics. And as Dr. T.V. Rao was asking, that what two things which we can take, two, three things we can take from Dr. Pritam Singh. To my mind, sir, it is going back to the basics, going and recognizing and taking those human qualities, taking those humanness out of the frameworks of our, credos and things like that, and bringing them in practice. The trust, the compassion, the empathy, the kindness. In fact, on humility. In fact, let me quote one instance with Dr. Pritam Singh, which I had, and that to me is a perfect example of humility. It was in year 2016, on the day of Teachers' Day. Actually, I did not call him back till late afternoon, and I received a solid dressing down from him. He called me back and said, "Have you forgotten that on Teachers' Day, you're supposed to pay respect to your teacher?" Now, that kind of lesson, that kind of memory is etched in my mind. That is the kind of humility which we need to look at and see that what kind of great teacher has these basic qualities. So we have tried practicing this in our organization in these times, which has given us an opportunity, given us an chance to revisit and go back to the basics. So we need to go back to the basics, practice this, while other things will evolve, they will work out. But the basic human nature, the basic things. So for HR, this is a God-sent opportunity to go back to the basics, to work out on those basic qualities, and the compassion, the kindness. In fact, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, which is famous for a lot of things, but one very good comment she made is she said that I refuse to believe that you cannot be both compassionate and strong. Because normally in business thing, we sort of say that if you're being compassionate, if you're being too lenient, then the results will suffer. But I think it's otherwise. So I will at this moment stop by saying all this. I am sure that I have stuck to that 5 minutes timeline of Dr. Bhandarkar. Thank you very much. More as we discuss further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joshi. That was such a perfect timing. Next we go to Dr. Malia. Dr. Malia, would you start?
Thank you very much, Ashaji, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Matter of great honor for me to be part of the first Dr. Pritam Singh Memorial Lecture. I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. A minute from my treasured time of the 5 minutes or so to give my tribute to Dr. Pritam Singh. I had a very unique relationship with him. Collectively, I must have not interacted with him for more than around 50 hours or so in my life, over say 10 or 12 occasions. But the sheer quality and depth of our discussions has left such a positive depth, has such a positive impact on my thought process that I was the one who actually approached the organizers of this webinar to allow me as a matter of tribute to be part of this session. And this is the first time that I have approached an organizer to say that I would like to be part of this entire tribute that I would like to give to Dr. Pritam Singh. His deep knowledge and his many contributions in multiple fields are so well known that if you try to recall that within a short span of a minute, actually, you will be doing a disservice to his memory. But what I can really say is that one common thing that we shared together, him and I, was a common interest in Urdu poetry. And my tribute, I would like to end by sharing this thought with him. बड़े गौर से सुनते थे हम बातें तुम्हारी, तुम ही सो गए दास्तां कहते कहते, मुसाफिर थे तुम भी, मुसाफिर है हम भी, फिर किसी मोड़ पे मुलाकात होगी. And this is my tribute to him as I now try to rechannelize my energy and bring it back to the theme that we are talking about, which is to say organization excellence and how do we go around navigating this excellence in moments of turbulent times. So actually, what is the focus? The focus is on creating organizational excellence. The anguish and distress is the fact that turbulent times unsettle the journey of excellence. Therefore, the remonstration is how do organizations and leaders navigate such turbulent times to effectively ensure the continuance of the journey of excellence. So 3 things. There is an organizational excellence to be created at all points of time. Without that, you cannot succeed. The anguishes, adverse and turbulent times destroy this situation. Do not let the journey continue. And therefore, the remonstration is, how do you continue on the journey despite of the turbulence? Let me therefore begin by trying to, first of all, define excellence as I understand. And of course, I know that Asha and all have written books on excellence, but this is how I see excellence. Excellence is the most connected, engaged, and differentiated way of fulfilling the highest quality, collectively identified, and inclusively actioned purpose of the group. So the purpose of the group, which is a very engaged process, this is a process of how do we connect, engage, and fulfill that purpose of the organization with an intention to create flourish to all the stakeholders and bring authentic happiness to everybody. So if that is the definition, a zillion factors, and we saw Rajiv identify a few factors. We will see Alka and all the others also share a few factors. So a zillion factors drive and contribute to organizational excellence. But I would like to single out one particular, call it competence or call it whatever you like, and do not try to do it with a butcher's knife, but do it with the scalpel of a surgeon. But I would like to identify one particular competence which always is very critical for leaders and organizations to be able to continue and strive with their excellence journey through turbulent times. And that is passion, sincerity, and commitment. If you have passion, sincerity, and commitment, it will help any organization through turbulent times to be able to re-engineer its entire journey and be able to drive it to success. Let me put 1 minute on each of these three within the 5 minutes that I have got. First, let's talk about passion. What does one really understand by passion, and why is passion important? But why does passion have to be further qualified? So passion is what we call josh. Passion is what we call jazba. It reflects a maniacal pursuit full of fervor, zeal, vehemence, gusto, zest, and in a way, a fanatism to achieve the purpose. So that is very, very critical. And unless and until you have that, your journey to excellence, which has been defined with the purpose, will never be achieved. And therefore, you need to have passion for the purpose. That is very, very important. Passion is very, very important in turbulent times because irrationality is the unintended accomplice which causes disaster. Now, passion is blinding. Passion has no levels. It does not have any values at all. So you could be passionately pursuing something without realizing that you are going off track, and irrational behavior is an unintended consequence of passion. So therefore, whilst passion is very important, it is like a sword with double edge. It can cause you a lot of disaster, and therefore, passion needs to be qualified by a certain value qualifier called sincerity. And therefore, sincerity is something which is part of passion to be able to drive organizations through turbulent times. Sincerity is about being unfeigned, no falsification. It is a qualifier to the value of passion, expression of integrity, doing the right things, achieving your purpose through the right routes only. Which is, if you recall, when we write letters or you make any correspondence, you certainly want to end up the correspondence by writing yours sincerely, which is to say that I may not know you, and why should you believe what I'm saying? The sheer sincerity with which I'm trying to express what I have said, please accept that as my communication to you. So sincerity is the value that really drives passion in the right direction, because otherwise, passion has maniacal abilities to drive you without the qualifier of sincerity. So passion, sincerity, and the third is commitment. Adversity and turbulence induces desire to abandon action by fostering frustration. The turbulence and adverse moments have a tendency to create a certain element of frustration, as a result of which, unless your commitment is 100% to the purpose, your desire to abandon that is very, very high. Therefore, commitment is very critical. It is like a pledge. It is like a promise. It is like taking charge and fulfilling the promise despite of turbulence. It talks about resilience. Unless you have resilience to keep falling and rising again, because you do not really know what the adverse moments are going to create as a challenge to you in your journey. Therefore, unless and until you have commitment, you will not be able to drive it. Therefore, look at all of these three as one common kind of capability that organizations and individuals need to have: passion, sincerity, and commitment as an integrated whole that drives excellence. Passion mindlessly provides the zeal. Sincerity directs it towards positivity, and commitment ends up creating a resilient attitude towards the whole thing. And I see Asha raising her hand, so I believe now I have a 1 minute time, and I hope that hand raising was not about adjusting her hair accidentally, but I want to believe I have only 1 minute's time. So living in the world of Black Swan events, which where we were introduced to, and we are all aware of it, adversities are unwelcome but unavoidable visitors. Adversity destroys the technology, it destroys the tools, it destroys the processes, the strategy, and the skills of people. You tend to abandon everything, and therefore successful organizations are those organizations who navigate through turbulent times with passion, sincerity, and commitment to reconstruct the journey. Faint-hearted have to abandon the journey. The successful only go. I would like to end with a quote, a very beautiful quote. And as I said, I shared this love with Dr. Pritam Singh of sharing Urdu poetry. He says, "Manzil ऊंची और अलग कितनी भी हो, रास्ता पैरों के नीचे और ताकत हाथों में ही होनी चाहिए." Adversity or no adversity, if you have passion, if you have sincerity, and if you are committed, you will thrive and succeed. These are some of my thoughts.
Thank you, Adil. That was very richly energetic.
Thank you.
Now, ma'am, Alka-Mittal-ji, your turn. You've been very patient, but your name is MITTAL, so I can't help it.
Happy with that, knowing the day it is. I will not be spilling the beans, but yes, it is a day where the men have to be in the forefront, I would say. So greetings to Mr. Singhania, Dr. Sola, very distinguished fellow panelists whom I have heard with right attention. And Dr. T.V. Rao, who's seen as a guru by most of us. Other highly accomplished professionals who are with us today for this virtual event, NHRD and office bearers who have planned out this whole show, I would say, and dear participants. Padma Shri Dr. Pritam Singh, a corporate guru, a prominent academician, institution builder, and an expert. He steered the business agenda and set the context for 4 to 5 generations of HR professionals and practitioners. I would refer to him as Bhishma Pitama of the HR fraternity, who has seen HR evolve over last few decades, I would say. He was a friend, philosopher, and guide for ONGC in his different roles, different organizations. And he was a guide to many of the ONGCians as well, including myself. I have personally benefited and learned a lot from him whenever I got an opportunity to listen to him or interact with him at different junctures in my career. While I pay homage to this great thought leader, I would like to talk about things and talk about his works and his words while I'm talking about how we can achieve organizational excellence in disturbing times like this. So many business journals, articles, and experts have been talking about the strategy of survive, revive, and thrive in this changing business scenario. And while we are talking about this, I think for most businesses, the current pandemic has certainly been about survival. During such times, the core values, as my fellow panelists have also spoken about, of an organization really come into greater relevance, and they stand by us in these tough times. Values such as trust, mutual trust, resilience, agility, adaptability are topmost, as has also been said earlier in this event. For ONGC, our role as the energy anchor of the country and our duty to the nation as energy soldiers was at the forefront while we were going ahead in the initial days of lockdown. Though the time was difficult, the pandemic situation was very challenging and the oil prices were falling as well. The challenge of sustaining operations on land and onshore or offshore during the nationwide lockdown was tough, but our commitment to the larger purpose of our existence was total. Our colleagues, whether the executives or the non-executives in all the remote corners, were just committed towards making sure that our work goes on, our operations continue. And this kept our morale high and our resolve unwavering because our focus was on the larger purpose. And further, during this phase, Constant connect and communication with our teams in remote fields, offices, and installations is what held us together. We were all together in it, and we were all making sure that we prove that ONGC is able to cope with this tough phase. And we continued to go strong. We just spoke about late Peter Drucker. Today is his birth anniversary as well. He very aptly said the greatest danger in the times of turbulence is not the turbulence itself, but to act with yesterday's logic. And that is what ONGC was concerned about, and all of us were concerned about. And that's why it is said that an organization that must renew itself periodically and have its people ready for the future. It is us who create the future by how we manage the present, how we understand what the future is likely to be, and we plan our actions and our vision and our strategy accordingly. I strongly believe that people are the most important resource in an organization. Intelligent use of their knowledge and capabilities is one of our major determinants for organizational success. At the end of the day, it is people who make this world a home. Especially in a situation such as this, it is a real opportunity for HR leaders and the wider HR function to step forward, help leaders navigate the change, and prepare the organization for the future. At the same time, we must ensure that the workforce remains motivated, engaged, and productive. During COVID-19, we at ONGC made sure that the safety of our colleagues was prime, and we ensured required changes in working pattern were carried out so that they are safe in their respective workplaces and at home as well. And full medical support was given to each and every colleague of ours and their families, and even to the retired colleagues who had superannuated in the past few years. And no financial strain was there on them, put on them, but there was a renewed appeal and emphasis on increasing productivity and also ensuring due prudence while in our financials. As a result, our operations were maintained at nearly pre-COVID levels at all times. Fundamentally, we are all humans with common needs. And at the same time, each of us unique in our own way. We all have our different aspirations at different points of times in our career. There are a lot of factors, both tangible and intangible, which make a difference to how the workforce, how the human resource uh, grows or gets engaged in an organization. I will touch on 5 elements which I feel really make a difference to how the workforce remains engaged with us. Being valued and recognized is something which is very, very close to everyone's heart. It has been to very close to my heart all through my career. I'm sure my other colleagues in ONGC and other colleagues in HR have also sensed it in their organization. Strong two-way communication is extremely important under any situation, more so during turbulent times, I would say. Value addition through capability building. This is one area where learning and development, where the more we do, the more we can do, actually. And during last 7-8 months, ONGC, during the COVID scenario, also could organize around 220 training programs, online training programs. And while earlier we were doing it in classroom mode, and we were not having online programs, those many of them, but we could go ahead and do it, and in different areas as per the individual and organizational requirements. And we imparted training to 7,600 and 600 employees of ours, colleagues of ours, and 57,000 training days were captured during this point. And a shared sense of purpose is something which kept us going. And as I have already shared, that is something which is very, very important for an organization. The larger the organization, more so, I would say. And when we are talking about our commitment, about work, about making sure that the targets are met, the workplace has to be a fun place to be. Otherwise, how will the employees remain connected? How will they remain engaged? Because they cannot be just coming to work for work. They should be coming to work happily and knowing that they are happy being at workplace. And that is what our colleagues have been missing. While they are working remotely, they all say we do miss the ONGC office presence, because that gets them really charged for contributing the maximum for the organization. Coming to strategic role and direction of HR, when we are talking about the strategy, I would like to just touch on one thing, that at the turn of 2018, in fact, in 2019, ONGC got together, ONGCians got together, different levels, and we came up with the Energy Strategy 2040. And that was a time when we put our heads together, our thoughts together to envision the vision which we had for our company. And it was to be a diversified energy company with strong contribution from the non-ENP businesses and playing the anchor role in the India's energy security scenario. Although the current pandemic has forced businesses to survival mode, I can share that our long-term vision, which we had set for ourselves, still remains very much in focus. And we have made good headway during these 7-8 months also towards that. To achieve this shared vision, we were already working on developing as a future-ready organization that can drive the ambitious agenda, have the required capability build, and the organizational structure to support the imperatives with focus on digital, technology, R&D, business development, advanced processing and interpretation, which is so important for us in the ENP business, and large-scale project management. We have huge projects going on in different parts of the country. All this actually came to our advantage during the pandemic situation. And when our digital platforms were enabling us to remain connected, whatever the situation of lockdown, we were in different remote areas. From HR point of view, I must emphasize that the industry must focus on key aspects of talent management that can take the energy to the next level, because our energy has to be high, then only we'll be able to go to the next level, which is the need of the hour, I would say. It includes access to the best talent, promoting diversity and inclusion, continuous capacity building, enhanced performance management, more so in this era where we are working remotely, and being open to new ways of working. So agility, flexibility, technology adoption, collaboration, and creating inclusive work culture have to be very important values for us for ensuring that we become future ready and we are able to move with confidence towards the future that we have created for ourselves. I strongly believe that we, the HR professionals, need to be closer than ever to the business strategy in these conditions. We are able to help organizations tide over this tough time with our presence and our commitment in these times. We need to fully partner with the business to achieve our organizational goals and objectives. I was trying to look at Asha ji to see if she's raising her thumb. So I think I may have crossed by half a minute or so. So thank you so much for being so patient and listening to me. But as being a lady, I have to have the last word. And that is why I spoke my heart from my heart. So thank you so much for being patient. And it's really a privilege to be here, especially the kind of occasion we are observing today. It's really, I would thank the organizers for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Alka ji. Thank you. And in the interest of a large audience, which is listening in and also sending questions, I think I have to quickly read out something which Prem Singh has sent me. I think he had asked the question, what are the other reasons why 19th November is a big day? So one answer has come from Mr. Mehdi. It is Mrs. Indira Gandhi's birthday. Sandeep Roy says it is Rani Lakshmi Bai Jayanti. And Sangeeta Mathur says today is World Philosophy Day. So it seems to be a pretty important day, and that's interesting. So that's what I wanted to mention. And now can we go to some questions? Because
today, incidentally, is also the International Men's Day.
Men's Day, right. How could I miss that? Yes.
That's what I was trying to hint at.
I realize. And on International Men's Day, Alka, certainly we don't grudge you getting more time.
May I just, shall we go to the questions? And, I think there are some lovely questions that we have to address. And all of you have triggered everybody's minds. While I have my own set of questions, but I think I should be fair to the audience who has been listening in very patiently. So the first question would be, there are many questions, all cannot be taken, but something which is key is what I'm taking up. How to reduce a trust deficit? Rajiv ji, you had talked about trust. So would you like to take this forward? How to build trust?
So I think the fundamental builder of trust is authenticity. When the leader and others say what they think and do what they say, and do that again and again and again. Of course, competence is required, I guess, to be able to convert thought into action. But I would say authenticity. Now, there are some other word about, I guess, walking the talk, you can say, if authenticity sounds too big a word. But I would say fundamentally authenticity, speaking the truth, walking the talk. Removing the mask, having the courage to be who I am with my strengths and equally with my weaknesses.
Correct.
So that old macho man style is gone.
Oh, for me, it's gone, dead, buried, and it never was there.
Okay. Okay. Anyone wants to tackle that trust question, or shall I move to the next?
So, Asha, I have only one thought to share, and just to add on to what Rajiv has already said. Sure. Trust is not like a medicine that you buy from a pharmacy, all right? So you can't have a 1 kilo of trust which you can buy and distribute. Trust is to be built over a period of time through behavior, which reflects that authentic desire to have a relationship based on integrity. And therefore, it is an investment in behavior. It is an investment in intention. It is an intention of happiness to be created, which leads to excellence.
Good, great.
I'd like to add one point, Asha.
Yeah, sure.
To build trust, the people, we are in a world where now being interested in other people is almost like invading the space. But in many respects, I think great leaders that they build trust is because they're interested, they're curious about their followers. Because trust needs some level of interaction. And often we think that what we like is what everybody does. But and in terms of trust, is important. It's always exceeding what people would expect from you. And in order to exceed, of course, you need to know. And so something that somebody told me once is, if you're curious in others people will be curious on yourself. And therefore, you build trust. And it's something that, unfortunately, in these days, this can be misunderstood, or it went too much on swinging the ball. But I believe curiosity and being interested genuinely. I really like what Rajiv said, but a term that I use in my village is being genuine, being authentic and genuine. Yeah, authentic and genuinity is very similar. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pushp Joshi, you would like to address this. You talked something about rewarding failure. Maybe you can throw light a little bit more, because the question was, should we reward failure? So since you had touched upon it briefly, maybe you can give some of the aspects behind it.
Yeah, I certainly feel that we need to actually recognize failure. Now, rewarding not in that sense of, the sense of reward per se, but we need to actually acknowledge the effort behind that. So we need to definitely acknowledge failure. We need to make failure as something which is acceptable, which is something, it's not a taboo, it's not something which is, demolishes your personality, demolishes your self-worth. So in order to enhance the self-worth to people, we need to recognize the efforts behind that. We may call it the challenges or recognizing the challenging aspects or whatever name we want to put it. By us, I certainly feel that we need to recognize the failure. And once we decide to recognize, we will definitely accept. We will definitely try and create an environment which again goes back to creating trust, accepting what we are, and with all our humility, with all our efforts which are there. So in very short answer is yes, I firmly believe that we need to recognize failure and not to take it into a negative domain, but try and encourage, because after all, it is said so many times that it's just a stepping stone to success and things like that. So that's what I feel.
Isn't that closely related to building a work culture, suitable work culture? If you have any thoughts on this, now I'll move to, okay, Rajivji.
No, I think it's a very critical part, because if innovation is going to be one of the key factors for an organization's success and sustained outperformance, you cannot have innovation unless you have risk-taking and experimentation. And by definition, risk-taking and experimentation means there will be failure at least 50% of the time. So therefore, what is important is what do you do after you fail? So right. Of course, there are whole innovation models. I'm not saying anything new. It's a very difficult culture to create, at least in Indian circumstances, because, we do not encourage failure. We want success. All our HR levers, if you look at it, are based, including our variable pay, on success. So it's a huge, huge challenge, and it calls for a complete relook, a complete new paradigm of the HR levers, where if you want to create an innovative organization, how do you encourage risk-taking and how do you handle failure? And in the new normal, this is going to be really, really important.
Rajiv, the only qualifier I have with you, I'm sorry for jumping in, rewards are for performance. From performance, there can be success. From performance, there can be failure. But there is a reward for action, for agility and performance. And that is the direction we have to push for.
Well put, Adil. Well put.
I'll just add a sentence here. This is something from my personal experience. At the turn of the century, when I was newly designated as in charge HR at Mumbai, I took certain decisions, and some of them were not the best of decisions, I would say. So at the end of an year, I would give a record of what I had done in a year to my senior, my director. So in that, I specifically wrote that these are the 2 decisions which I see were learnings for me. They were not the best of decisions, but they were my learnings, my takeaway from having tried my hand at something different. And I got a call from my director then, and he said that it's fine. I am very happy to see your report, which was not mandatory for us to give. And you have shared that you have learned something by trying your hand at a slightly sticky issue. So this is one way we can take care of our, risk-taking, building our risk-taking strength or capacity, I would say.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, Dr. Sola wants to say something.
That it is, and it's very privileged for me to hear your views, because you have a different context. But in this part of the world, or where I normally work, there is very few people that say, oh, we shouldn't fail. But then the reality is that fail, as Rajiv said, and also Dr. Adil said, it is something that not necessarily is rewarded. And that's why my point before about gamification. In a game, it is normal to fail. Yeah, it is actually what attracts you. The moment you start to play a game and you know how to play it, you're bored and you move away. That's why I really invite you guys, that you manage so many thousands and hundreds of thousands of people, that the problem is, how do we get people to fail at scale without failing the company? Because that's the real issue, is when, my 3 thoughts about it is that failure is good if it's fast and inexpensive. like in a game, yeah? Because it's fast and inexpensive. Second is, the only failure is failing to learn. Because any failure, if you learn out of it, is not a failure. And the third thing is not from me, but it's from a very famous scholar called Carol Dweck that says fail is the acronym for first attempt in learning. Yeah. So when you fail, is because you haven't learned yet. So it's the power of yet. And that's the problem in the Western management style, is that you need to get it right at the first time. And I always joke with my children when some people say, oh, you know, your children, they play very well tennis. And they say, well, you have never seen the many hours that they spend to own a shot. So you see only the result, that, you know, the reality. And this is, again, using tennis. Richard Williams, the father of the two Williams sisters, always say, you know, there is only one failure, and which is when you plan to, you know, when you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Yeah. And the reality of learning is that you need to put yourself to it and say, what did I learn out of this? In the good and the bad, because often in businesses, we overperform and we don't know why, but we never investigate. We should investigate as much in the failure. Failure is a bad prediction. Yeah. So a bad prediction can be under or can be over, but we need to investigate both to be prepared in good and bad times for the stuff. That's the very nature of science. But anyway, I don't want to monopolize it, but I really like your thoughts. You really made me thinking a lot.
Yeah. So another question is regarding what are the biggest challenges for leaders in the present and in the future? Who would like to take the lead on this, please, quickly? Pushpji, you've been silent. Would you like to take this on?
I was just trying to actually make a list. So I've still not finished that list because challenges will be innumerable. There will be a whole lot of challenges. So I've not finished my list. But very frankly, there will be a lot of uncertainty, both in people who are leading them and people who are their constituents. So first of all, leaders will have to deal with their own uncertainties, their own challenges, their own fears, because I mean, it's a universal truth that either we can be in a state of denial in facing a challenge, or accept the challenge. So first, the leaders would have to themselves come to the grips of the situation and accept their own fears, their own challenges, their own way forward, their own strength, and thereafter try and build that compassion, that hope in the organizations, in the people, in their stakeholders.
Okay.
Asha ji, can I just come in to add something?
30 seconds. I'll give you only 30 seconds.
Yes. One big thing for leaders to decide is what not to get involved in.
Yes. Alka ji?
Yeah. So what I would like to share here would be that while compassion has to be at the top of the list, I would say, in these tough times. And secondly, what is also very, very important is for us to ensure that we keep the energy, the spirits high. So for that, while we are doctors are prescribing all kind of vitamins and herbs and treatments like steam inhalation, etc. What I would prescribe would be certain fun activities, like Dr. Sola also mentioned, some games, some activities. We have organized over last 8 months, we must have organized so many small activities. Make a mask competition for the family, small humans of ONGC story writing kind of thing. Then we have recently, we are going through a process of organizing Mosaic, an event for the persons with disabilities, because they are the ones who are sitting at home. They are not coming to office and they need to be engaged. And we are going ahead with the event for these 400 colleagues of ours who are in the remote areas, working from home or facing the challenges, feeling a little low. So we have got all of them engaged in this. I think out of 400, around 150 or 60 would be participating in these series of events. So, and on the Independence Day, we had a patriotic song competition.
Ma'am, only 30 seconds. Only 30 seconds.
A person from Mumbai and a person in Assam got together, created a song, and rolled it out for all organizations. So that is
Thank you. Thank you, Alkaji. The point which you were connecting with what Davide said, I imagine Davide is talking about gamification.
Gamification, yes.
Using AI and robotics and stuff like that.
Yes.
Yes. So a quick response from my side after listening to all of you. You are saying HR has to be recast. You are saying HR has a greater role to play than ever. You are saying leaders have to be almost like superhuman beings. And by that I mean they have to be full of optimism. They have to be full of resilience. They should be having greater and greater capacity to, face challenges. And they have to provide leadership, as Davide has well said, be present in their absence and be leaders in the absence, because it's in a virtual kind of a setup. So these are the few things which are emerging right now. But one question which somebody asked, which I think would be relevant for any of you to quickly take up: what happens to training and development in the new normal when virtual training is less effective? What are your thoughts, people from industry sitting here? What are your thoughts? What happens to training and development? Because I can see that in the maybe 5-10 years down the line, gamification may become big, but what's going to happen in between? Anyone?
I can pick it up if nobody is doing it, but I think, and I can tell you my experience in those 9 months. And in those 9 months, I always spend a lot of time in pedagogical engineering. But in a class, you can always manage it. So when you do it online, it becomes even more important that you really do very well the engineering of what is going to happen. And you need to plan it almost by the minute, so that you make sure that the engagement is there, that you can get the people. Of course, the technology might help, but it's very, very important that you have super clear section by section of the training, what is really the outcome you need to get, and you work it backwards rather than just sharing good things. Because people online, they will not give you their attention, and it's really and really leveraging all the things that offline you can overcome by just using our ability and craftsmanship. Online doesn't exist. People are really shrewd and they want to have an outcome. If not, they don't give you the attention. They switch off the camera and they go on and have a coffee or anything that could happen. It's you don't know what happened. I'm talking about MBA students, but of course I did also executive programs, and I see in executive program where the outcome is very clear, the engagement is even higher than in class. But if the engineering behind lacks structure and red thread, it's a disaster. That's my experience. It's just practical. It's no research based.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think we have about two or 3 minutes more, and if you permit me, I will speak now in closing. What I wanted to say is that ultimately what's emerging is that people and the human spirit are at the centerpiece of this whole business of transformation. And how can we as HR leaders, business leaders, and all kinds of leaders promote that, celebrate that, nurture that, encourage that? And for that, we ourselves have to raise our level of consciousness, our level of humanity, and our level of capacity to operate at our best level, to be our best self. And Dr. Singh's two famous statements in every class that I have heard: without purpose, we all perish. Purpose unites, ego divides. So it means once more we are coming back to leaders who inspire through purpose. Purpose which is not personal, but purpose which is organizational, purpose which is bigger than an individual. And lastly, it's exactly 7:30. Last line from me is, some people are strongly present even in their absence. And one can strongly feel the presence of Dr. Singh, even though he is no more with us. Thank you for this opportunity. I would like to close from my side. Over to the organizers.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asha ji and all the panelists. Mamta ji, over to you, please.
On behalf of National HRD, the NCR chapter, I'd like to thank everybody that's been present here today, our eminent speakers, but most of all, Professor David Sola. Your session was extremely interesting. We're seeing wonderful comments already flying around in various forums. I'm sure you could have filled the entire 2 hours and we'd still be asking for more. We'd like to thank, of course, the person who opened our session, Mr. Singhania. I think he's not here with us today, and all our speakers and Asha ji for lovely moderation. So thank you very much. We'd like to close in time and we look forward to the next session, but we will hold memories of Dr. Pritam Singh forever and forever. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening ahead. Thank you. And Dr. Sola, have a great day ahead. Thank you. Thank you all viewers for connecting and joining us this evening. Thank you. Have a safe evening.
Thank you very much. It was an honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you to all the viewers. Thank you.